Welcome back to the channel. This game is game 7 in the match between Nigel Short and Lev Alburt. Short was already 4 points to the good at this stage. The game followed a familiar pattern of the Alekhine defence. It was interesting that Black decided to play the Alekhine again, even though he hadn't had very good results with it. And this was all the same as game 5. And this suspect move, d5. And here where the position differs slightly from game 5. Albert decides to take the knight. But you would say still that White's got a comfortable position. Black tries to break out in the centre, giving up a pawn temporarily. And White tries to hold it onto it. But you would say White's got a very nice position here. He's pawn to the good, better development, more space. Black hits the c pawn. And this is an interesting move, offering the bishop as a trade. Black plays rook to d8. I mean, knight takes, queen takes. And this still looks good for White. But he plays rook to d8, just naturally developing. White shores up the bishop. And Black attacks the a pawn, which White decides to give up, as there's no sensible way to defend it. So Black's got his pawn back, but he's wasted a lot of time, still not developed fully. And here Nigel decides to start playing on the king side. The knight tries to get back into the game. And finally the last piece comes out for Black. Bishop a4, with the idea of maybe playing b5 at some point and maybe exchanging the knight. The knight moves, offering the trade of bishops, which Nigel ignores, which potentially could have, after the trade of bishops, may be able to let Black sort of simplify the position. Maybe b5 would have been better. And then h5, trying to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. He allowed the bishops to be exchanged. And again, I think maybe the rook would have been a better option. As we shall see, because the queen comes back to the square it's just moved from. With an eye of taking the h pawn at some point. But you would say now White's still got a better position, but it's not clear how he's going to proceed. Bit of manoeuvring. a6 to get any out of the line of any potential threats with c6. But Nigel plays c6 anyway. So he gives up a second pawn to try and create weaknesses. And the bishop gets a lovely square on c5. And queen to g5, obviously hitting the h pawn. And here Black finds a nice resource possibly. I'm not sure if it's sound or not, but knight takes e5. And obviously the idea is after knight takes knight, Then b6 pin forks the queen and knight. But maybe I think Nigel maybe I was just playing queen to g3, and after this, you say that white's still doing okay. The h pawn's going to drop, and all his pieces are working nicely. But he decides to take the pawn on h5 and then sack the exchange. So now it's unclear now whether white's got. Well, he's still slightly better, but I'm not sure if he's got enough to win the game. The threat is obviously bishop d4 and some threats along the dark squares. So black tries to block this, but now obviously loses the e pawn. If he'd have played queen to f7 to try to defend the f pawn, the e pawn, then bishop d4 would have been quite crushing. So he played queen to g7. Nigel took the pawn, so he's got so he's got a pawn back, and now second pawn. Queen to g6 to offer the trade, which Nigel's not interested in. He's got to try and keep the initiative. And here black attacks the queen. Maybe something along the lines of rook to e8 would have been better, allowing the other rook to come across and harass the queen. And after something like this, it's not clear how white's going to get the queen back out, and I think black can hold the game quite comfortably. But obviously Albert was 4 points down, so he decided to try and keep the game going. So Nigel manages to get his queen out to e5. Nice, lovely central square for it. And I think this is probably the worst mistake of the game. It's not immediately clear as to why. The computer gives the line rook to c6, and after bishop d4, rook to e8. And obviously there's no check on h8 because the king f7 just traps the queen. But then another pawn goes. But black's still in the game. He can still hold the position. But h6 is subtly different because bishop d4 does come now, and there's a lot of pressure on along the dark squares, and rook takes a6 is a threat as the queen's overloading has to defend g7. So black has to hit the queen, which now takes the pawn, and the queen blocks. Queen to b7, obviously renewing the threat of the on the a pawn. And it's not immediately clear as to how black's going to defend it. So he just chooses to ignore it and play queen to g6. There's a number of good moves here, but the move before the time control, Nigel just repeats and goes back to d5. And black's still got the option of playing queen to e6 again, which is probably the best option. I mean, he may have been in time trouble. He plays king to f8, which actually loses. There's a number of moves that black can play. Bishop c5 check. Or even the move that he did play, which is b5. And there's now pressure on the a pawn. If he takes the a pawn, then bishop c5 check will come, and black will have to give up one of his rooks. And white's still got a very nice advantage. But Albert plays another mistake, which is queen to f7, and this allows a nice finish by Nigel. Queen to d6 check, and there's no real way black can continue. I mean, you can play queen to e7, but then the h pawn drops, and then the a pawn drops. Rook to e7, and I think white can just simply take the a pawn and push it down the board. And something like this, then bishop c5 is a nice move. Obviously, if the queen takes, then the bishop takes back and still pinning the rook. Then you may try king to g8, but then again after taking the pawn, something like this, and again the pawn just drops on a6 and becomes a real danger. So another win for Nigel, who is now 5 points up in the game. I wasn't not sure what the stipulation of the game was. I think there's one more game left in the match. So I'll return with that at some point. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye for now. Cheers.